All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So this is high-performance DeFi. High performance meaning better, faster, more efficient. I do not know about y'all. Nothing I do in DeFi is fast or efficient, to be fair. And it's not because the protocols are not fast and efficient. The blockchains might be. But I am very slow and methodical about how I move my coins because I know if I screw anything up, they're gone. Vamos. And because of that, those are the coins that in the next hype cycle are going to 1000x, and I could have bought a yacht with. So I have lots of regrets already, many sleepless nights, and so I'm very careful about what I do in DeFi. Let me explain why I have so many sleepless nights. I'm Bailey Reitzel. I've been a journalist in the space since 2012, bought Bitcoin at $11. I have none of those Bitcoin still. So that's why I don't sleep very well. Many stories like that. Now I mostly program events in the crypto space, but I do a little bit of writing as well. So that's why you'll see the Defiant up there. And now, enough about me. I'll introduce my panelists. I have Austin Barak right beside me. He is a partner at CoinFund, which is a digital asset-focused investment firm. Then we have Firestorm. Pretty epic name there. He is an advisor at Dexalot, and that is a decentralized exchange looking to bring a centralized look and feel to crypto, to DeFi. And then I have Luigi Denorio De Meo. He is the director of DeFi at Ava Labs. So we're going to start with Firestorm because I want to talk about this idea of bringing a centralized look and feel to DeFi. We had talked previously over email, and you had just mentioned, look, for all of traditional finance's faults, it does work pretty well in many cases for trading. And so I guess I'd like you to sort of set the scene in terms of, I know you have history in traditional finance. What in traditional finance are you just baffled decentralized finance doesn't have?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Hi, everybody. So first of all, traditional finance has had trading for a very long time, right? Trading is actually very efficient in TradFi markets in the form of centralized exchanges. The reason why we've arrived at that level of efficiency is because, we have market makers who figured out how to do these things and the trading actually takes place on central limit order book exchanges where you have an order book and people manage prices for you, basically, for the benefit of the people who want to trade. Now, this wasn't really possible with the generation 2 blockchains, most importantly, Ethereum. And don't slaughter me, these are my opinions, but I personally believe that ETH was just too slow originally in its original form, didn't have enough capacity, didn't have enough throughput for something like an order book to exist and actually operate properly. I tried one in 2017, user experience wasn't great, and it was very expensive, right? And obviously, at the back of this, AMMs were invented, right? Uniswap. AMMs are actually the most dominant form of exchanges, also on Avalanche as well. But it's a complete different paradigm, right? And central limit order books have advantages where when the TVLs go down, your prices don't necessarily suffer because your market makers can still actually hold really good prices even in downturns, right? So Avalanche, being Avalanche, providing the speed, the finality, the capacity, and especially the subnet capability where you can create a subnet that's a exchange on its own, now allows us to bring back the central limit order book style trading to DeFi. And from a capital efficiency perspective, I believe central limit order book style trading is the most capital efficient way to trade.
Luigi, I know you also have history in traditional finance, so what do you want to bring into DeFi from TradFi?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say that a lot of what traditional finance has in a lot of respects is actually quite efficient, as you mentioned, in terms of price discovery and the actual mechanics of exchanging assets. What's not efficient is this layer in between the different counterparties that is completely centralized, which allows them to extract a ton of value, create inefficiencies, and also just reduce fairness. So what I think DeFi really will bring to market over a very long amount of time is the ability to exchange in very efficient ways, the ability to transact permissionlessly. So Uniswap is the first, use case of this, right? It allowed people to, transact permissionlessly amongst themselves. It allowed people to become market makers in a permissionless fashion via LPs. And what Firestorm here is talking about is a central limit order book, which is a different type of exchange, which is traditionally more efficient than an AMM. I think we started with an AMM because that's easier to code, simpler to put on chain. In a lot of respects, the user interface is more simple as well. And so now we're kind of, I think, spreading our wings, so to speak.
Yeah, and what's funny is, okay, so central limit order book, right? I think we probably all know what that means. I sort of know what that means. I'm not a trader. But Firestorm had emailed me and said he wanted to talk about AMMs versus CLOBs. CLOBS, and I was just like, what the hell is a CLOB? We use so many acronyms in this space, and it's a bit hard to understand in many ways. So I guess, did you want to add on to what Luigi was saying?
No, I think Luigi covered all the aspects. So AMMs, when they were invented, solved, actually, it's quite genius, right? It actually solved a protocol level problem on the user application itself by you no longer needed to deposit assets. You can just click a single button and swap your assets, right? That's, on the user experience side, amazing. Second, AMMs also solved the fact that maybe market makers, traditional market makers, aren't yet in this space back then, right? And now anybody could become a market maker. There's, of course, a trade-off, right? There's impermanent loss, difficult to manage positions. There is MEV that actually eats into your positions, whatever. But still, those were quite large innovations. And it moved the issue from basically the protocol level to the application layer. Now, ETH is trying to actually speed up a lot of things with its new version, new form. But we obviously have Avalanche, which gave us the capability to build and launch a centralized exchange. Another example, and just so that I'm not just shilling my own project, another example, a very successful project is DYDX, right? They actually deployed on an L2 solution, and it's been so far the most successful central limit order book exchange, which is in DeFi as well. So, there are multiple innovations that I think the trading and the capital efficiency side is stronger on the central limit order book side. The UX side has and still is much more stronger on the AMM side.
Yeah, that's fair. And we'll get into a little bit more of that as well. Austin, I want to pass it to you. How much, as an investor, how much do these design decisions and user experience and the way people build user experience affect what you invest in? And I ask that, I know it kind of sounds like a silly question, but I ask because there's a really high threshold for handling inconveniences in Web3. We all just kind of do it and don't mind it for some reason. So yeah, I guess how much does that go into your investment thesis?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because in an open source environment, the moats are a lot smaller than you would see typically in Web 2. So what it typically comes down to is the community that you build, and a lot of that centers around the user experience. One of the reasons why Uniswap is still, one of the largest players in swaps and has the majority of market share, at least on ETH, is because it was just very, very easy to use at a time when crypto hasn't always been very easy to use. And I think that's something that, while people are comfortable being uncomfortable and jumping through a whole bunch of hoops to use DeFi today, that only allows us to get the first million users. But to get to 100 million users, or to get to 500 million, or to get even level of penetration of mobile phones or internet usage today, you have to make it a whole bunch easier. And I think that's why this is really important.
Yeah, to be fair, I liked crypto when it was really small, and it was easier to understand. So if we get to 100 million users, it's going to be complex. I want to stay with you. Do you have Avalanche companies in your portfolio, in the coin fund portfolio?
We do have Avalanche companies in our portfolio, yep.
Okay, I was kind of looking through the portfolio and just sort of making sure, but how much does what blockchain they're using affect your investment decisions as well? And I guess I ask because there's a lot of layer 2s that sort of function on this same thesis of better, faster, more throughput, maybe better security.
Yeah, so I think, there's a couple things to unpack there, but transaction speed as one of them is something that I think is becoming increasingly less relevant. And there's a whole bunch of solutions to scale and different approaches that different ecosystems are taking. But I think what's more important is the way you scale and the flexibility that you can have when you scale. And one of the things that I find particularly attractive about Avalanche is the subnet architecture and how that allows teams to build and really, really easily build, which is an important part of that, application-specific chains that can have high throughput, but also have very fast finality. And that's the one thing that's sometimes missing in the transaction per second discussion is, how quickly a transaction is finalized, and being able to finalize a transaction within a block is really important, especially as you onboard more traditional financial applications and any sort of kind of application where there's real value at stake. So one of the companies, for example, that we've invested in, it makes it easier for subnets to bootstrap their validator set. But I think that core infrastructure is one of the reasons why we're really bullish on Avalanche and the ecosystem developing there.
Luigi, I wanted you to touch on that as well, and just in this broader context of like a multi-chain future, right? And I think that narrative is moving more towards the modular blockchain thesis, and so that's nice for the subnets, for the Avalanche's build. But just talk about why that's so important and how Avalanche itself is looking at that multi-chain future.
Yeah, I mean, I think Avalanche has been pretty consistent, probably since the initial white paper dropped, that horizontal scaling was going to be the way that we were going to achieve scale, and vertical scaling is much harder. And so the subnet architecture, what it allows is a very low-level programming environment where either applications or sectors, it could be a niche sector like gaming, for example, could deploy their own environment that, and in the future this could be permissionless, that they can coalesce around, right? And because of that, they're not interrupted by other people's activities. So traditionally speaking, if you are on Facebook, for example, the load on Google doesn't necessarily, disrupt your activity, all else equal. So I think this is kind of like how we're taking this approach on Avalanche, that an NFT drop on the C chain shouldn't disrupt Dexalot's subnet, by any means. And this is kind of the issues that we've seen on Ethereum and Solana, and on the Avalanche C chain at times as well. So that's the approach we've taken. We also think subnets allow really interesting economies to be built because you can customize the gas token of your subnet. You can customize the staking dynamics in terms of the validators that validate your subnet. You just have a lot more full of a toolbox. And so I don't expect that applications that are looking for product market fit, on day one, we'll be deploying subnets ad nauseum. I expect applications that have product market fit to, kind of do what DYDX is doing and go into a Cosmos zone, right? Because they view that environment as being sovereign and their own and much more customizable. And so I kind of think that that's what Avalanche is going to provide. So subnets provide a lot more than I think what's out there in terms of other blockchains in this element. They are VM agnostic. You can run a custom VM for whatever your use case is, or you can use Subnet EVM, which is an SDK we're developing, we're continuing to iterate on, that continuously makes deploying your own EVM chains really easy. So I think we'll continue to improve on this. It's been a very short amount of time, and I'm very excited about that future.
How many people are using subnets right now?
There's like 2 active subnets, which the first one deployed in I think it was April, so they're quite young. Yeah. I think it's probably in terms of monthly active users, 60 or 70,000 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, which is unfortunately a large percentage of crypto.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Firestorm, did you want to add on to that?
I was just going to say, and it's not related to the user count, but having a TradFi background allowed me to see sort of the perspective on the old world, if you will, and when the old world, old guard, TradFi, whatever you want to call them, when they look at these new technologies, the way they approach it is, how do I put it in my own sandbox with my own custom rules, with my own stuff, right? The subnet architecture is literally perfect for it, right? It's not like you can go to an Ethereum L2 and customize it for yourself. You can only really do it with something as flexible as a subnet on Avalanche or some of the other competitors as well. But this approach, in my opinion, is going to be a lot better fit for the institutional world, where people are going to be slower and they're going to require custom and specific rules to be applied for the environment. I know there's one example, there's the institutional subnet that, the Avalanche team is working on. It's a great example for it, right? Every bank out there wants to apply their own KYC rules or their own capital rules, etc. And having this super custom toolbox is going to work well for them, while, a very generalized solution is not going to, in my opinion.
Okay.
No, I was just going to touch one thing on that. I think it's important, as he mentioned, with respect to institutions, to understand that a lot of them want environments that are not private but are permissioned, and a subnet can be programmed in that fashion, right? They do want some control, whether it's jurisdiction or other elements as well. So.
Yeah, I don't want to go way far down this hole that I'm about to go into, but I guess the argument there is just like, why are we rebuilding this architecture for institutions, and what are they going to get out of it that is better, faster, stronger, more high performant than what they have now?
Yeah, so what blockchains are really good at is being transparent, and they don't have that in the traditional world. So I think the recent events that we've seen all across crypto in terms of under-collateralized lending across CeFi institutions, what we've seen there is effectively black box institutions that you had no idea in terms of what the assets and liabilities were. When the issues came, it was pretty clear who was swimming without shorts on, right? So in DeFi, that's not what happened. It was very clear what the protocol had in terms of assets and liabilities, and it's because of that transparency that that blockchains provide that I think institutions can leverage that. Now, whether or not they will find that interesting for their businesses, I think is something that is a valid question, and but I do think they understand that avoiding it is probably not going to be long-term possible for them.
Yeah, sure.
So transparency, right? Think about it from a regulator's perspective in finance. They constantly bombard, large banks about what did you do at this specific time on this exchange? What is your activity? Prove to me that it's not nefarious. Prove to me that you're not doing some of the things I ban you to do, right? When you move this activity to the blockchain, they no longer need to go to the bank and ask. They themselves can build the tools or hire the people that do the analysis and show them, right? I think the transparency aspect is huge. And also on the institutional side, think of it this way, right? If you have an algorithmic execution platform that you built, you bought servers, you had many years of software development, you built various tools around it, and you deployed it onto your own hardware. Now, when you move the stuff to the blockchain, you only have the software, and the actual infrastructure is maintained by the validators, the miners, whoever are operating the network. It's a huge cost savings, actually. We don't really talk about it as much, but instead of deploying $50 million to build a market-making system, now I actually can cut that cost in half and just focus on the software development and outsource the infrastructure to the blockchain. I think those are huge, huge benefits for institutions to move on to the blockchain.
I'm going to back out of this hole, but I do want to talk about this more. And also because if there are developers here, do you want to develop on a blockchain that the banks are using? Only banks are using? There might not be developers here. I just am if I was a developer, I'd be nah, I don't want to do that. I want to build something that is different than the system that we currently have, right? Anyway, backing out of that hole.
Just one thing on that point. I think that's the really exciting thing about what's being built here is you have that flexibility. So you can build financial products for kind of traditional financial players, or you could build something that's completely new, and you could have your own subnet environment, or you could build on the C chain. You could build interoperability solutions that connect it all together. So there's just a really wide surface area.
It's fair, yeah. I'm going to stay with you, Austin, because I feel like you haven't talked a lot. And we don't have much time. What's going on? I think they're speeding up our clock. But so what is your vision of DeFi based on who you've invested in and the companies that you're looking at investing in? What does that 10-year DeFi protocol look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and also, it's thinking 10 years in the future in crypto is really hard, and
it's true.
And it's
okay,
wild.
5 minutes from now, what is your?
It's wild to think that DeFi summer when governance tokens were only really becoming a thing. That was only 2 years ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. But one of the things that I think is really unique about DeFi versus kind of traditional finance or like kind of centralized finance use cases is, so you have the transparency, you have global access, you have permissionlessness, you have censorship resistance, but also one of the really core elements on a product side is you have composability. So you can allow all of these different financial products and all of these different tools to interact with each other and layer on and kind of find different opportunities to earn yield or to participate in different economies that aren't really possible when you have these siloed ecosystems. So I think we'll see more and more DeFi protocols building together, where we're already starting to see that, where you can kind of provide liquidity on an AMM, take that LP position, collateralize it to borrow capital, to then deposit in a yield aggregator. You can do a whole bunch of different things, but I think that grows. And one of there's a couple use cases in traditional finance that haven't grown as much in DeFi, and I think it's just waiting for the right opportunity as far as the underlying infrastructure and pulling in large enough players, and that's futures and options. So really excited to see growth there, because if you look at kind of the size of derivatives markets in traditional finance versus spot markets, it's an order of magnitude larger, and it's actually inverted in crypto, and I think we'll see that shift over time. And there's been some really amazing teams building in options and derivatives, but it's still really early, and I think some of the dependencies on transaction speed and throughput and finality and customizability, we're only getting to that point where they have the tools that they need to get there. So it'll be exciting to see. I don't know if I actually answered your question of where things will be in 10 years, but those are the things that I'm excited about.
I don't really expect anybody to fully answer my questions when I'm up here.
Yeah.
Firestorm, same question to you. Like, what does it look like in several years? And I guess for you specifically, as the advisor at Dexalot, are you telling them to think more multi-chain than just Avalanche?
So, I mean, yes and no, right? Even I think the good folks of Avalabs understand that we're going to have a multi-chain future, and I don't mean subnets, right? I've heard Gun say this many times. There's going to be solutions and applications deployed across, many chains. The one thing we are absolutely thinking about is our subnets. If you think about subnets at a very, very high level, they are a separate chain to the C chain. C chain is a subnet as well, right? Technically, which means that as long as we have good bridging, we could actually use our subnet still to do the actual execution with low cost, quick finality, high throughput, while allowing people in other chains to do the trading, right? We could have a bridge that just wraps that user experience into a single transaction, and that happens. So in that sense, yes, we are definitely thinking multi-chain. Going to the other part of your question, I think in the next 10 years, the biggest thing that will happen, besides the products, etc., is people will understand the DeFi Legos that we ourselves, the folks here, are comfortable with. A much larger amount of people in the world will understand it, right? The typical simplest example I give is, we have Benki on Avalanche, right? I could show people that I can pull out a loan in 3 seconds with one click. You can't do that with a bank. Getting any kind of loan takes 90 days, a very cumbersome process, and you can do that with Benki. And that's a very powerful real-life application. I tried to purchase a house with this. My offer wasn't accepted, but the experience, the example is still very powerful. And a lot of people out there still don't know it. I feel like these types of use cases will actually become very common, and that's going to be the most important change.
Go ahead.
One other thing, kind of just building on that, I think one of the most exciting innovations that we'll see is truly accessible global markets. And, you sometimes, being in the US, take for granted that it's really easy to invest in stocks, or lending is actually not very easy. So that's something that DeFi clearly solves. But just being able to take the assets that you have and either earn income or grow that wealth over time in many places around the world, that's actually not very difficult. Not very easy. So to be able to builds a financial system where anyone can easily invest and grow their wealth is really important, and I think one of the core tenets of DeFi.
Luigi, I want to give you a chance to talk about your vision as well.
My 10-year plan?
Yeah, you have 16 seconds, though, so just FYI.
We're going to make it? No.
We're going to make it.
Yeah, we are going to make it. No. So real quick, what I would just say is, like, I think there's two real avenues for DeFi. I think there is the one where it's focused on trading, replacing a lot of the traditional finance blocks and making them in a decentralized manner. And I think that will happen, and you'll see a bunch of unicorns develop that will, I actually do think, take away some of what traditional finance has. And then I think there's the other part of DeFi, which a lot of people don't talk about, where it's going to be effectively the top of the funnel for all the other use cases in crypto. People will know that they're playing with DeFi type applications, but they're using it to facilitate the other applications, whether it be social media, gaming, et cetera. So that's my fast answer.
Actually, that was pretty good. We're only a little bit over. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you very much to our panelists.